Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we have talked about cellular death, and then in which we have studied necrosis, apoptosis, and at the end we studied about free radicality. So from the very beginning, in the first lecture, previous class, we have talked about pathology and terminologies. Then we discussed the cellular growth adaptation, which will lead to the reversible and irreversible cell injury. And now this is the third step called cell death. And what is the landmark or classical feature of cell death is loss of nucleus. And loss of nucleus happens in three steps: pycnosis, karyorrhexis, and karyolysis. What is pycnosis? It is an ink drop, or you can say nuclear material condensation. Then we have karyorrhexis, meaning nuclear fragmentation. And then at the end we have karyolysis, dissolution or resolvation, nuclear material dissolved. So these three features are plus myelin figures are classical features of irreversible cellular injury. And then you can say we talk about necrosis. Karyorrhexis, karyolysis, and pycnosis happens in necrosis also. But in apoptosis we have only pycnosis and karyolysis. So what is necrosis? It is cell murder. And we have discussed that what is necrosis, like Aftab told us, it is an under pathological condition, death of large group of cells followed by acute inflammation. It is called necrosis. And if we talk about some you can say pathological influence causing the death of large group of cells followed by acute inflammation. Then we have few types of necrosis. First of all, we have talked about coagulating necrosis, in which the cellular architecture becomes firm and but nucleus becomes disappear, and all the organs with due to the ischemic infarction will lead to coagulative necrosis except brain. Brain is go through liquefactive necrosis. And in coagulative necrosis we have wedge-shaped infarctive tissue that is pale. And we have discussed why it is wedge-shaped and why it is wedge-shaped. The pointing of the wedge-shaped necrotic tissue point towards the pathology, any thrombus or atheroma. And that is pale infarction. Contrarily, we have red infarction also. Example for red infarctions were testicular infarction, pulmonary infarction. Red infarction due to the reperfusion cellular injury, due to the reperfusion or re-entry of the blood. And we can say the hallmark of coagulative necrosis is stoned appearance of the necrotic tissues. And most common or susceptible to coagulative necrosis is heart. Then we have kidneys and spleen and liver and lungs, and then don't forget our limbs. Then we have Zenker degeneration necrosis, that is the coagulative necrosis of the skeletal muscles. So that was about coagulative necrosis. You can see over here ischemic infarction, wedge-shaped nucleus, pale infarction, and all that. Then we have liquefactive necrosis, in which there is a pure proteolytic enzymes to liquefy the cellular structures. In coagulative necrosis also we have denature of proteins, but necrotic tissue becomes firm. But in liquefactive necrosis it liquefies. First of all, we have a mnemonic called DLE from brain. The microglia cells, after the hypoxic injury or after the death, they release proteolytic enzymes which will liquefy the cellular architecture. Then we have abscess from the neutrophils. We have proteolytic enzymes that will cause liquefaction. Then we have pancreatitis. The pancreas take on enzymes like lipase, build auto-engulf, self-engulf, called autolysis. Its own structure is called the parenchyma of the pancreas will lead to the liquefactive necrosis. And then we have hydrolysis, the expose if lipase engulf or destroy its own structures, pancreas called autolysis. And if leukocytes or other cells destroy them, that is called hydrolysis. In the parenchyma of the pancreas leads followed by a necrosis called liquefactive necrosis, but peripancreatic fat under the influence or leads to the or having a necrosis called fat necrosis. Okay, now we will discuss about gangrenous necrosis. It is coagulative necrosis plus mummified tissue or shrunken tissue or dry tissue, that is called dry gangrene. It happens in diabetic patients. We have seen that patients having distal limbs ischemia due to atherosclerosis. As we know, in diabetic patients we have decreased blood supply, oxygenated blood supply to the distal organs, distal limbs, especially the lower limb. So that will lead to the dry gangrene. dry gangrene plus superimposed infection, like if you're having if a person having a dry gangrene plus an infection superimposed on it, that will lead to the wet gangrene or liquefactive necrosis. And there is another type of wet necrosis, that is gas gangrene, pathogen called Clostridium perfringens, that produces some toxins that will induce a gas in that particular part of the necrotic tissue. And there is no fun in telling that in dry gangrene we don't have that much putrefaction or smell, only shrunken skin and dry skin you can see, and well demarcated areas. But in wet gangrene we get more putrefaction, more smell, and some blister formations are there. But in gas gangrene we have gas formed by a pathogen called Clostridium perfringens. Okay, then we have caseous necrosis, that is cottage cheese-like appearance of soft and friable necrotic tissue, and it is coagulative necrosis plus liquefactive necrosis. It is a collection of coagulative necrosis and liquefactive necrosis, caseous necrosis. It happens in which we have a granulomatous inflammation in TB, tuberculosis, and fungal infection. So you can see over here, cottage cheese-like appearance of the soft and friable necrotic tissues. Coagulative necrosis plus liquefactive necrosis leads to the, or you can say name of coagulative necrosis plus liquefactive necrosis, caseous necrosis, happens in TB and fungal infection. Then we have fat necrosis, chalky white appearance due to the deposition of the calcium. And there are two pathologies. First of all is pancreatitis, which will lead to the peripancreatic fat necrosis. Then we have trauma to the fat tissues, especially we have talked about breast trauma. Maybe while a female having athlete of tennis ball, or having an injury like RTA, which eventually will lead to the trauma to the fat tissues, and from the fat cells there will be release of fatty acid. Fatty acid will bind with calcium. That is the process called sponification, soap formation. Sponification plus small bodies are clinical features of dystrophic calcification. What happens in dystrophic calcification? Serum calcium and phosphate level are normal, but calcium deposits at abnormal places. On the contrary, we have metastatic calcification, in which increased level of serum, increased level of calcium and phosphate, and calcium will deposit at the normal places. Okay, then we will talk about fibrinoid necrosis. In fibrinoid necrosis, there is a damage to this blood vessel wall. Due to the damage to the blood vessel wall, there is a leakage of proteinaceous substances, and there will be accumulation of mostly the eosinophils at the walls of the blood vessels. And on staining, we will see the bright pink staining. And the things which lead to the fibrinoid necrosis are vasculitis, or malignant hypertension, or eclampsia, or autoimmune disorders like systemic lupus erythematosus. Then we have, last but not the least, we have gummatous necrosis. That is a type of coagulative necrosis, but more associated with spinocerebellar infection, like in tertiary syphilis, or you can say it is a hypersensitivity reaction to the syphilis, to this spirochete. Then we have, after the necrosis, we have talked about apoptosis, that is cell suicide or programmed cell death, or it is an ATP dependent pathological or physiological condition which leads to the death of single and small group of cells, not followed by acute inflammation. Okay, now we will talk about physiological examples and pathological examples of apoptosis. Physiological examples we have discussed about endometrial shedding, endometrial lining shedding during the menstrual cycle. We have discussed in detail about that. Then we have talked about breast after the weaning. That is also a physiological example of apoptosis. Then we have cell removal during embryogenesis, like webs. And if there is any pathology over here, then you can see, I hope you saw a few patients having syndactyles, more fingers. That is the pathology over here. Then CD8 T cells killing the virally infected cells. That is also physiological examples of apoptosis. Then pathological examples are graft versus host disease. Then the clinical pathological example of apoptosis. And then we have consolvent bodies followed by in viral hepatitis. Then we have ductal obstruction due to the parotid gland or pancreas or kidney will lead to the
atrophy of these glands due to the ductal obstruction. Then lastly, we have DNA damage due to radiation, due to hormone therapy, or due to anti-cancer drugs will lead to the DNA damage, and that will eventually lead to apoptosis. That is a pathological example of apoptosis. Then we will have discussed about morphology. In apoptosis, then cell will shrink down, eosinophilia will increase, or you can say the nuclear material will be fragmented, and cytoskeleton will be dispersed, and there will be formation of cytoplasmic bleb, and that will lead to the, or eventually becomes apoptotic body engulfed by macrophages. We have discussed diagrammatically. We have intrinsic pathway, extrinsic pathway. In intrinsic pathway, there is a cell injury or DNA damage or decreased hormonal secretion, like in menses. That will lead to two steps. First of all, stimulation of the p53 gene, that is a stimulator of apoptosis, and inhibition of the BCL2, that is an inhibitor of apoptosis. That will eventually lead to the release of cytochrome C from the mitochondria into the cytoplasm or cytosol. That will stimulate the initiator caspases, especially the initiator caspase number 9. Then in extrinsic pathway, Fas and Fas ligand or CD95 plus T1 necrosis factor alpha or T1 necrosis factor, that will lead to the stimulation of the initiator caspase 7, and these initiator caspases will stimulate the execution caspase. Before I forget, Fas and Fas ligand is also play important role in negative selection in thymus. We have discussed that in first of all we have positive selection and then negative selection in thymus. So we will discuss that in positive selection we check if these cells are reactive to own cells and other cells. Then in negative selections we check how much the intensity of these reaction to our own cells. So leave that topic to that day. Then we have a CD8 T cells, cytotoxic T cells. When they come close to the cell, they release a structure called perforins that make a pore in the cell, and through these pore they put the enzymes called enzyme B that will eventually stimulate initiator caspase. These initiator caspases at the end of the day will stimulate execution caspase, especially the most important execution caspase is 3. That will do two things: endonucleosis and proteases. Endonucleosis will do the nucleus fragmentation, and proteases will do the cytoskeleton dispersion. And due to these factors, these nuclear material and cytoskeletal disrupted pattern structures material will make a structure called cytoplasmic bleb, and this is cytoplasmic bleb, and this cytoplasmic bleb will convert into apoptotic body, and this apoptotic body having ligand for the macrophage cell receptor. See, these receptors are being carried by these macrophages and engulfed by the macrophage. So that is about apoptosis, following intrinsic pathway and extrinsic pathway, and CD8 T cells mediated apoptosis. There are two terms I forgot today's class. Necroptosis, this is, you can say, necrosis and apoptosis together. In necroptosis, this is the morphologically like necrosis, but the mechanism of action is like apoptosis. And what happens in necroptosis? There is caspase independent killing. And what is pyroptosis? This is the killing of the cells of microbes induced by pathogens, and in which the interleukin 1 and caspase 1s are involved. So now then we have discussed about the stimulants of apoptosis. p53 gene, that is the guardian of genome, stimulant for apoptosis. Baxdap gene, glucocorticoids, ischemic injury, and dead cells by viral infection. These are the things stimulate the apoptosis, helpful in apoptosis. And inhibitors of apoptosis are BCL2 gene, BCL-XL, and sex steroids. Then that was about necrosis. Then we have discussed about differentiation between apoptosis and necrosis by few factors like cell size. In necrosis, cell size will increase. In apoptosis, cell size will decrease. As we discussed that in apoptosis, cell shrinks. And in nucleus, there is a pycnosis, karyorrhexia, and karyolysis. But in apoptosis, we have only nuclear fragmentation like pycnosis and karyorrhexis. In plasma membrane, in necrosis, it is disrupted, but in apoptosis, it remains intact. Then cellular content there is a leakage of cellular content in necrosis, but there is no leakage of apoptosis. There is no leakage of cellular content in apoptosis, as we have seen. These content leads to the cellular bleb and enters into apoptotic body and engulfs the macrophage. There is no leakage of cellular content outside this structure. So then we have inflammation. Yes, I told you that necrosis is followed by acute inflammation, but there is no inflammation in the apoptosis. Then energy. Yes, necrosis is a passive process, but apoptosis is an active process. We have discussed that apoptosis is an ATP dependent, pathological or physiological, programmed death of single or small group of cells, not followed by acute inflammation. Then we have a staining called tunnel staining, that is negative for necrosis and positive for apoptosis. Then we have gel electrophoresis for DNA, in which we see in necrosis we see the smear pattern, but in apoptosis we see the step ladder pattern. So that was about necrosis and apoptosis. Then we have discussed about free radical injury. What is free radical injury? Definition: chemical species having single unpaired electron in its outermost orbit, that are called free radicals. So we have discussed physiological, like oxidative phosphorylation. We have cytochrome C oxidase, which transfer the electron to the oxygen. Then you can see over here, if oxygen gets one single unpaired electron, it becomes superoxide, then it becomes hydrogen peroxide, then it becomes hydroxyline, then it becomes water. It's normal physiological conditions. In pathological condition, ionizing radiations will convert the H2O into hydroxyline free radicals. Then we have inflammation, like NADPH oxidase converts the oxygen into superoxide, like in neutrophil oxygen dependent killing, in which we have discussed there is a oxidative burst. Then we have some drugs and chemicals. We have discussed that in hepatocytes in liver we have P450 system that detoxify the drugs and chemicals that will generate free radicals that will enter the cell at the end of the day. Then we have metals like copper and iron that will also generate free radicals by a reaction called Fenton reaction. And there is no funny telling, we will discuss in the future that copper will lead to Wilson disease and iron will lead to hemochromatosis. Then we have discussed about mechanism of action of free radical injury. First one is peroxidation and oxidation, in which in execution cascades we have endonucleases and proteases. Don't mix these endonucleases and proteases with this peroxidation and oxidation. This is the mechanism of action of free radical injury. Peroxidation of lipids and oxidation of proteins and DNA. DNA also damaged by aging and oncogenesis. Then we have elimination. How to eliminate these free radical injuries? For this we have a mnemonic called EMA. E for enzymes. There are two enzymes from mitochondria. First of all is superoxide dismutase and second is glutathione peroxidase. You can see over here superoxide dismutase will try to act on superoxide and reduce this superoxide. Then we have glutathione peroxidase from the mitochondria that will try to reduce the hydroxyline free radicals. Then we have from the peroxisome, we have enzyme called catalase that will try to reduce this free radical. So this is a pattern of elimination by the enzymatic activity from the mitochondria and from the peroxisome. You can see over here, enzyme mitochondria superoxide dismutase. From mitochondria we have glutathione peroxidase and from peroxisome we have catalases. And where they act, you can see over here. If you can zoom in, you can see. Then after E we have M, some metal carrier proteins that we have discussed that copper and iron will lead to free radical injury. Then we must give some proteins that will bind with these metals and try to decrease their consequences. Metal carrier proteins for copper we have ceruloplasmin and for iron we have transferrin. And last but not the least we have A for elimination, that is antioxidants. First of all is glutathione and vitamin A, C and E. Then there are few examples like carbon tetrachloride. It is an organic solvent most commonly used in dry cleaning industries. And when there is a action of P450 system on the CCl4 carbon tetrachloride that will convert into carbon trichloride, that will lead to the rough endoplasmic reticulum swelling, and due to the swelling of rough endoplasmic reticulum there is a detachment of ribosomes from the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and due to the detachment of ribosomes from the RER that will lead to the decreased production of proteins that eventually will lead to the decreased apolipoprotein, and that will end up in the fatty change in the liver. Then second example is reperfusion. Due to the reperfusion, in the dead cell, there is a production of oxygen-free radicals. Like in heart, there is increased cardiac enzymes. If there is a reperfusion of, you can say re-entry of oxygenated blood in the myocardial infarcted tissues. Then we have paracetamol, acetaminophen, as we have discussed. 1000 milligram is the limit. The acetaminophen being, worked by the P450 system, and that will, if there is excess use of this medicine acetaminophen, that will produce free radical injuries, and the pathologies, the consequences are diffuse chemical hepatitis and renal papillary necrosis. Then fourth one we have metals. We have discussed the copper will cause the Wilson disease. There is excess of copper in the body due to the deficiency of ceruloplasmin or some other factors. The increased amount of calcium will deposit in the liver, will deposit in the eyes or in the basal ganglia, hepatolenticular disease. And we have discussed that in previous semester that hepatolenticular disease will affect the basal ganglia, hepatolenticular liver, and lenticular system like lentiform nucleus, putamen, striatum, and all that, and all the consequences regarding that about basal ganglia, tremors, rigidity, hypokinesia. Then this copper also will deposit at the cornea, key circulation rings are the hallmark for that Wilson disease. Then for iron, hemochromatosis also deposit in the liver and all that. And last but not the least, for copper we should give ceruloplasmin, and for iron we should give transferrin so that they can bind with these metals and try to decrease their effects. Then we have retinopathy of the prematurity. If there is, we give the oxygen more than 50% for the retinopathy of prematurity, then there will be damage by the free radical injury, oxygen free radical injury. So that was about free radical injuries, and I think I didn't miss anything. Do you have any question you may ask? Otherwise, rest of